Welcome to the deep dive. Ever think about those unseen nudges, the ones that might influence how we think or what we do?
It's a fascinating question, and yeah, it pops up in some really ancient texts.
Exactly. And today we're diving right into that, looking at parts of Surah Al-Anfal from the Quran.
Right. These verses, they give us this incredible view on some basic human things.
Hmm.
Faith, how leadership works, how we deal with challenges,
Yeah.
all of it.
Yeah. So for you, the learner joining us today, think of this as us trying to pull out the core wisdom here. We're not just, reading. We're aiming to get the main ideas about belief, about guidance, even finding strength when things get tough.
We'll touch on quite a range from handling tricky situations like the spoils of war to the importance of obedience and that inner conviction.
Our goal is really clarity, to explore these important messages without getting too bogged down in every single detail.
Exactly, to offer insight.
Okay, so let's unpack this. First up, what makes a true believer? And it's interesting. The text acknowledges faith isn't always, well, simple.
No, it really isn't. Verse 201 gives this very human angle. It says, uh, roughly, that even the God-conscious, when an evil thought from Satan pops up, they remember Allah and then
Yeah.
they see clearly.
So it's not about never having those thoughts.
Right. It's about the reaction, that immediate remembrance. That's the key to getting back on track.
Like hitting a mental reset button almost. Okay, but then verse 202 shows the other side. What happens if you don't check those thoughts?
Precisely. It talks about how devils can uh, plunge their brothers deeper into error. They don't stop. It suggests this kind of downward spiral if negative influences aren't addressed.
So that initial awareness is crucial, isn't it? And this idea of an internal battle, maybe? It seems to connect to verse 2, which describes believers.
It does, yeah. Verse 2 gives this whole picture. It says, believers are those whose hearts feel, well, a sort of fear or awe when Allah is mentioned. When his verses, the Quran, are recited, their faith actually increases. They trust in their Lord
Hmm.
completely.
And there's more, right? Practical things.
Yes, practical actions. They perform the prayers, the salat, and they spend from what they've been given. So it's this mix, the heart, the mind, trust, and action.
So belief isn't passive, it actually shapes your life.
Yeah.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. A really big theme here is divine guidance and obedience.
Absolutely central. Verse 203 deals with this head on. When people asked for specific miracles, the response was basically, look, I just follow what's revealed to me, this Quran. It's the proof, the guidance, the mercy for people who believe.
So the text itself is presented as the main thing, the sufficient guide. No need for constant, I don't know, fireworks.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And then you get some very direct instructions on obedience. Verse 1 about the spoils of war is a key example.
Right, what does that say?
It says, they ask about the spoils. The answer, the spoils belong to Allah and the messenger. So then it says, fear Allah, sort out your differences, and obey Allah and his messenger if you are believers.
That if you are believers is important. It links obedience directly to faith, especially on community matters.
Exactly. It's not just nodding along. It's actively aligning yourself.
Yeah.
And this call to obey comes up again in verse 20. And then verse 24 gives it this deeper meaning.
How so?
Verse 20 is quite direct. Oh, you who believe, obey Allah and his messenger. Don't turn away when you're hearing him. But verse 24, wow. It says, oh, you who believe, answer Allah and the messenger when he calls you to what gives you life.
Gives you life.
Yeah, so obedience isn't just rules. It's the path to real spiritual energy fulfillment. It keeps you from, well, a bad end.
That's a really compelling idea. Obedience as vitality. Okay, let's turn inward now. Verse 205 talks about remembering Allah very personally.
Yes, remember your Lord within yourself, humbly and with fear, without loud words, morning and afternoon. Don't be neglectful. It's about this constant, quiet, internal connection. Sincere.
And not just outward stuff, but the inner state, that quiet awareness.
Exactly. And then verse 206 contrasts this with the angels.
How?
It says the angels near God are never too proud to worship him. They never get tired of it. It's like a model of constant, humble devotion.
Like a gentle push for us to drop the ego, maybe? And embrace that humility.
Could be seen that way, yeah. And this idea of harmony connects to verse 46 too.
Or does that add?
It says, obey Allah and his messenger. Don't argue among yourselves, or you'll lose courage and your strength will go. Be patient. Allah is with the patient. So here, obedience is directly linked to unity and strength. Bickering weakens the whole group.
Makes sense. Okay, now moving to another major theme. Divine help. Intervention and support. Verse 5 kind of sets a scene for this.
Right. It talks about God causing Muhammad, peace be upon him, to leave his home for a truthful purpose, even though some believers really didn't like it at first.
So even divinely guided actions might not make sense to everyone immediately. Shows our limited view, maybe.
Exactly. We don't always see the big picture. And then verse 9 gives this really strong image of help when things looked bad.
What image is that?
Remember when you asked your Lord for help and he answered, I will help you with 1,000 angels coming one after another? Direct, powerful, supernatural aid,
Mm.
boosts morale.
Wow, 1,000 angels. And the help wasn't just spiritual, right? Verse 11 mentions more tangible things.
Yeah, it's quite detailed. God sent slumber, like a peaceful sleep, as security. He sent rain from the sky to purify them, remove Satan's whispers, strengthen their hearts, and make their footing firm.
That's incredibly comprehensive. Sleep, rain, purification, resolve.
A whole support system.
Yeah.
And verse 26 reminds them of when they were few and weak, afraid of being captured, but God gave them safety, strength, and good things so they could be grateful.
It really drives home that reliance on a higher power, especially when you feel outnumbered or weak.
Definitely. And verses 42 and 43 about the Battle of Badr, they suggest this divine orchestration even when things seemed random.
How so?
Verse 42 says the way they met the enemy was unexpected, so that Allah might accomplish a matter already ordained. And verse 43 mentions God showing the enemy as fewer than they were, both in a dream and in reality again, that Allah might accomplish a matter already ordained.
So it implies a guiding hand, even in the chaos, shaping things towards a specific outcome.
That's the sense you get, a reminder that there might be a bigger plan we don't see. Now, the surah also talks quite a bit about dealing with disbelievers and hypocrites, and it's pretty direct about consequences.
Yeah. Like what?
Well, verses 13 and 14 talk about severe punishment for those who actively oppose Allah and his messenger. It's a stark warning.
Okay. And verse 16 gives rules for battle.
Right. It says believers shouldn't turn their backs in battle when they meet the disbelievers, unless it's a tactic, a strategic move or regrouping. Otherwise, it draws God's wrath. It stresses courage, but also smart tactics. Running away in fear is condemned.
And then verse 17, that's quite a statement about victory, isn't it?
It really is. You did not kill them, but Allah killed them. You did not throw when you threw, but Allah threw. It attributes the real success, the ultimate impact, to God.
Keeps things humble. Reminds believers their effort is part of something bigger.
Exactly. Verse 19 then offers the disbelievers a kind of conditional outcome. If they seek judgment, well, judgment meaning defeat in this context has come. If they stop fighting, it's better for them. If they attack again, God will counter again, and their numbers won't help, because Allah is with the believers.
So their choices have direct consequences. Yeah. Okay, then verses 21 and 22 address people who hear but don't listen.
Yeah, don't be like those who say, we heard, but they don't really hear. It calls the worst creatures those who are deaf and dumb, who don't understand. It's a powerful condemnation of just hearing words without letting them sink in or acting on them.
Just going through the motions isn't enough. What about verses 30 and 31?
Verse 30 mentions the plots the disbelievers made against the prophet. And verse 31 shows their arrogance, dismissing the verses as just tales of the ancients, rejecting them out of pride.
And we also see hypocrisy being called out, right, in verse 49.
Yes. It mentions hypocrites and those with disease in their hearts, saying the Muslims were deceived by their religion. But then it contrasts that with trusting in Allah, who is mighty and wise. It shows that gap between outward claims and inner doubt.
And verses 50 and 51 spell out the consequences for that kind of disbelief.
They do. They describe a painful end, emphasizing it's the result of their own actions.
And this isn't new, right? Verses 52 to 54 bring in historical examples.
Exactly. Like the people of Pharaoh. It shows a pattern. Rejecting messengers and signs historically led to destruction. It's a recurring theme.
Verse 59 seems like a final word on escaping consequences.
Pretty much. Let not the disbelievers think they can escape. Verily, they will never be able to save themselves. It underlines God's ultimate authority.
But it's not all passive acceptance for believers. Verse 60 talks about preparation.
Definitely. Make ready against them all you can of power, including war horses interpreted broadly today to deter God's enemy and your enemy, and others you might not even know about. It's a command to be strong, prepared, strategically ready.
Okay. Now, threaded through all this is the idea of tests, trials. Verse 7 touches on this, right? A moment of choice.
Yes. It recalls when God promised one of two enemy groups would be theirs, the armed fighters or the caravan. The believers wanted the easier one, the caravan. But Allah wanted to establish the truth and cut off the disbelievers.
So the test involved choosing between easy gain and a harder path aligned with God's purpose.
Seems so. And verse 8 clarifies why these trials happen.
Which is?
That he might cause the truth to triumph and bring falsehood to nothing, even though the criminals hate it. So trials are a way to sort things out, establish truth, expose falsehood.
Even the angels helping, like in verse 12, that connects to testing too.
You could say that. God tells the angels he's with them, so make the believers firm. He'll cast terror into the disbelievers' hearts. So strike their necks, strike their fingers and toes. Even with that divine help, it was still a test of the believer's own faith and reliance.
Right. And verse 25 gives a broader warning about trials, doesn't it? Affecting more than just the wrongdoers.
Yes. Fear the fitna, trial, affliction, which doesn't only hit those who do wrong. It might affect everyone, good and bad. It highlights community responsibility. We're all connected.
And verse 27 points out specific ways to fail these tests, like betraying trust.
Exactly. O you who believe, don't betray Allah and his messenger, or knowingly betray your trust things entrusted to you, duties from God. Faithfulness is key.
Then verse 28, this one might surprise some people. Wealth and children as a trial.
Know that your possessions and your children are but a trial, and that surely with Allah is a mighty reward. It's a reminder that even good things, blessings, can test us, test our priorities, our attachments. Are we putting them before God?
Keeps things in perspective. Okay, finally, let's look at unity and faithfulness. Verse 72 describes a really strong bond.
A very strong bond between those who believed, emigrated, and strove for God's cause with their wealth and lives, the muhajirun, and those who gave them refuge and help, the ansar. These are allies of one another. Real solidarity transcending old ties.
But verse 73 warns about the danger if believers aren't united.
It does. It says the disbelievers are allies to each other. And if you Muslims don't do the same act as one united community, there will be fitna, chaos, corruption, mischief on earth. Unity is presented as crucial for stability.
But verse 74 offers reassurance for the faithful.
Yes, those who believed and emigrated and strove hard, they are the true believers indeed. For them is forgiveness and generous provision. It confirms the reward for that commitment.
And verse 75 reinforces the bonds, even for later joiners.
Right. Those who believe later, emigrate, strive alongside the others, these are from you. And it mentions blood relations having rights too, but emphasizes this bond of faith. Allah knows everything. It creates this strong, unified body.
Okay, let's quickly loop back to the spoils of war. Verse 1 set the stage, saying they belong to Allah and the messenger.
Correct. Establishing the ultimate authority.
But verse 67 has a perhaps surprising take on taking prisoners for ransom.
It does. It says it's not really for a prophet to have prisoners until he's inflicted a major defeat. You desire the good of this world, ransom money, but Allah desires the hereafter. It suggests the early priority should be breaking the enemy's strength, not immediate financial gain. Focus on the bigger picture.
But it's not completely forbidden later. Verse 69 seems to allow enjoying spoils.
Right, so enjoy what you have gotten, lawful and good, and fear Allah. Once the main objectives are met, and if that God consciousness is maintained, then enjoying the lawful spoils is permitted.
And lastly, verse 70, it has a message for the captives themselves.
A compassionate one, yeah. O Prophet, say to the captives, if Allah knows any good in your hearts, He will give you something better than what was taken, and forgive you. Allah is oft forgiving, most merciful. It holds out hope for change, for forgiveness, even for former enemies.
Wow. Okay, we've covered a lot. As we wrap up this deep dive, what are maybe 2 or 3 key things for you, the listener, to really hold on to?
Good question. I think first, just realizing that keeping faith strong inside is an active job. It needs that constant awareness, that remembrance, especially when negativity creeps in.
Yeah, that really stood out.
Second, the huge emphasis on looking for guidance and help from God, especially when things are tough, and knowing that help can show up in ways you expect and ways you don't.
Okay.
And maybe third, just how vital unity, working together, and sticking to guiding principles are for the strengths of any community or even just for yourself.
For me, the real aha moment was seeing how consistently everything, good stuff, bad stuff, is framed as a kind of test. It really makes you think about how we react, what we value.
Absolutely. And these ideas, though ancient, feel incredibly relevant today, don't they?
Yeah.
Principles like ethical behavior, resilience, building inner strength, community value, they still apply to navigating modern life.
Definitely. It makes you wonder, considering these verses, how might our usual ideas of success or strength look different? And maybe more personally, what does it truly mean for each of us to listen, to really heed guidance when there are so many voices shouting for our attention?
Those are exactly the kinds of questions to sit with. And I'd really encourage you, the listener, to explore Surah Al-Anfal further. There's always more depth, more perspective to uncover on these big human questions.